That having been said, it is now time to actually go back to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, where we shall read the first ayat in the Surah and the elaboration on what it means. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. The scholars also agree that Bismillah is part of an ayah in Surah An-Namal, chapter 27. They disagree over whether it is a separate ayah before every surah, or if it is an ayah or part of an ayah included in every surah where the Bismillah appears in its beginning. Ad-Daraqutni also recorded a hadith from Abu Hurairah from the Prophet that supports this hadith by Ibn Khuzaymah. Also, similar statements were attributed to Ali, Ibn Abbas, and others. The opinion that Bismillah is an ayah of every surah except Al-Baqarah, chapter 9, was attributed to the companions Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Ibn Az-Zubair, Ibn Hurairah, and Ali. This opinion was also attributed to the Tabi'in, Ata, Tawus, Sa'id bin Jubair, Makul, and Azjuri. This is also the view of Abdullah bin al-Mubarak, Shafi, Ahmad bin Hanbal, in one report from him, Ishaq bin Rahway, and Abu Ubaid al-Qasim bin Salam. On the other hand, Malik, Abu Hanifa, and their followers said that Bismillah is not an ayah in al-Fatihah or any other surah. Dawood said that it is a separate ayah in the beginning of every surah, not part of the surah itself, and this opinion was also attributed to Ahmad bin Hanbal. On the matter of the Bismillah allowed in prayer. As for Bismillah allowed during the prayer, those who did not agree that it is part of al-Fatihah state that the Bismillah should not be allowed. The scholars who stated that the Bismillah is part of every surah except chapter 9 had different opinions. Some of them, such as Ash-Shafi, said that one should recite Bismillah with al-Fatihah aloud. This is also the opinion of many among the companions, the Tabi'in, and the Imams of Muslims from the Salaf and later generations. For instance, this is the opinion of Abu Hurairah, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Muawiyah, Umar, and Ali, according to Ibn Abdul Bar and al-Bayhaqi. Also, the four caliphs, as al-Kitab reported, were said to have held this view, although the report from them is contradicted. The Tabi'in scholars who gave this tafsir include Sa'id bin Jubair, Ikrimah, Abu Kilaba, Ajuri, Ali bin al-Hasan, his son Muhammad, Sa'id bin al-Musayyib, Ata, Tawus, Mujahid, Salim, Muhammad bin Ka'b al-Khuzari, Abu Bakr bin Muhammad bin Amr bin Hazm, Abu Wa'il, Ibn Sirin, Muhammad bin al-Munkadir, Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas, his son Muhammad, Nafi, the freed slave of Ibn Umar, Zayd bin Aslam, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, Al-Azraq bin Qais, Habib bin Abi Thabit, Abu Ashatta, Makul, and Abdullah bin Makil bin Mukarin. Also, al-Bayhaqi added Abdullah bin Safwan and Muhammad bin al-Hanafiya to the list. In addition, Ibn Abdul Bar added Amr bin Dinar. The proof that these scholars relied on is that since Bismillah is part of al-Fatihah, it should be recited aloud like the rest of al-Fatihah. Also, An-Nasai recorded in his Sunan, Ibn Hibban and Ibn Khuzaymah in their Sahihs, and Al-Hakim in the Mustadrak, that Abu Hurairah once performed the prayer and recited Bismillah aloud. After he finished the prayer, he said, "Among you I perform the prayer that is the closest to the prayer of the Messenger of Allah." Ad-Daraqutni, Al-Kitab, and al-Bayhaqi graded this hadith sahih. Furthermore, in Sahih al-Bukhari, it is recorded that Anas bin Malik was asked about the recitation of the Prophet. He said, His recitation was unhurried. He then demonstrated that and recited while lengthening the recitation of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Also, in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Sunan of Abu Dawud, and the Sahih of Ibn Hibban, and the Mustadrak of al-Hakim, it is recorded that Salama said, "The Messenger of Allah used to distinguish each ayat during his recitation. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all that exists, the most gracious, the most merciful, the owner of the day of recompense." Ad-Daraqutni graded the chain of narration from this hadith sahih. Furthermore, Imam Abdullah Ash-Shafi and al-Hakim in his Mustadrak recorded that Muawiyah led the prayer in al-Madinah and did not recite the Bismillah. The Muhajirin who were present at the prayer criticized that. And when Muawiyah led the following prayer, he recited the Bismillah aloud. The hadith mentioned above provide sufficient proof for the opinion that the Bismillah is recited aloud. As for the opposing evidences and the scientific analyses of the narrations which mention their weaknesses or otherwise, it is not our desire to discuss the subject at this time. Other scholars stated that the Bismillah should not be recited aloud in the prayer, and this is the established practice of the 4 Caliphs, as well as Abdullah bin Mughaffal, and several scholars amongst the Tabi'in and later generations. It is also the madhab of Abu Hanifa, Ath-Tawri, and Ahmad bin Hanbal. Imam Malik stated that the Bismillah is not recited aloud or silently. This group based their view upon the fact that Imam Muslim recorded that Aisha said that the Messenger of Allah used to start the prayer by reciting the takbir, Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater, and then would recite, all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all that exists. Also, the 2 Sahihs recorded that Anas bin Malik said, I have prayed behind the Prophet Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and they used to start their prayer with all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all exists. Muslim added, and they did not mention in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, whether in the beginning or the end of the recitation. Similar is recorded in the Sunan books from Abdullah bin Mughaffal, may Allah be pleased with him. These are the opinions held by the respected Imams, and their statements are similar in that they agree that the prayer of those who recite al-Fatihah aloud or in secret is correct. All the favors from Allah. The virtue of al-Fatihah. Imam Ahmad recorded in his Musnad that a person who was riding behind the Prophet said, the Prophet's animal tripped. And so I said, Cursed shaitan! The Prophet said, Do not say cursed shaitan, for if you say those words, Satan becomes arrogant. And with my strength I made him fall, he says. When you say Bismillah, Satan will become as small as a fly. Further, An-Nasai recorded in his book Al-Yawm wal-Layla, and also Ibn Maduyah in his Tafsir, that Usama bin Umair said, I was riding behind the Prophet. And he mentioned the rest of the above hadith. The Prophet said in this narration, however, Do not say these words, because the shaitan becomes large as a house. Rather say Bismillah, because shaitan then becomes as small as a fly. This is the blessing of reciting Bismillah. Bismillah is recommended before performing any deed. Basmala, reciting Bismillah, is recommended before starting any action or deed. For instance, Basmala is recommended before starting a khutbah, speech. The Basmala is also recommended before one enters the place where he might want to relieve himself. And there is also hadith concerning this practice. Furthermore, basmala is recommended at the beginning of ablution, for Imam Ahmad and the Sunan compilers recorded that Abu Huraira, Sa'id bin Zayd, and Abu Sa'id narrated from the Prophet, "There is no valid ablution for he who does not mention Allah's name in it." This hadith is Hassan. Good. Also, the basmala is recommended before eating. For Muslim recorded in his Sahih that the Messenger of Allah said to Umar bin Abi Salama while he was a child under his care, "Say Bismillah, eat with your right hand and eat from whatever is next to you." Some of the scholars stated that basmala before eating is obligatory. Basmala before having sexual intercourse is also recommended. The two Sahih recorded that Ibn Abbas said that the Messenger of Allah said, "If any one of you before having sexual relations with his wife says, 'In the name of Allah, oh Allah, protect us from shaitan, and also protect what you grant us,' meaning the coming offspring, from shaitan, and if it is destined that they should have a child, then shaitan will never be able to harm that child." The meaning of Allah. Allah is the name of the Lord, the Exalted, and it is said that Allah is the greatest name of Allah, because it is referred to when describing Allah in the various attributes. For instance, Allah said, "He is Allah beside whom none has the right to be worshipped but He, the knower of the unseen and seen. He is the most gracious, the most merciful. He is Allah beside whom no one has the right to be worshipped. The King, the Holy, the one free from all defects, the giver of security, the watcher over all his creatures, the Almighty, the Compeller, the Supreme. Glory be to Allah, high is He above all that may associate as partners with Him. He is Allah, the Creator, the Inventor of all things, the Bestower of forms. To Him belong the best names. All that is in heaven and the earth glorifies Him, and He is the Almighty, the All-Wise." Hence, Allah mentions several of His names as attributes for His name Allah. Similarly, Allah said, "And all the most beautiful names belong to Allah, so call Him by them." And, "Say, O Muhammad, invoke Allah or invoke the Most Gracious by whatever name you invoke Him. It is the same, for to Him belong the best names." Also, the two Sahihs recorded that Abu Huraira said that the Messenger of Allah said, "Allah has 99 names, 100 minus 1. Whoever counts and preserves them will enter paradise." These names were mentioned in a hadith recorded by At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, and there are several differences between these two narrations. The meaning of Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are the two names derived from Ar-Rahmah, the mercy. But Rahman has more meanings that pertain to mercy than Ar-Rahim. There is a statement by Ibn Jarir that indicates that there is a consensus on this meaning. Further, Al-Qurtubi said that the proofs that these names are derived from Ar-Rahman is that At-Tirmidhi recorded and graded Sahih from Abdul Rahman bin Auf that he heard the Messenger of Allah say, "Allah the Exalted said, I am Ar-Rahman. I created Raham, womb, i.e. family relations, and derived a name for it from my name. Hence, whoever keeps it, I will keep ties to him, and whoever severs it, I will sever ties with him." He then said, "This is a text that indicates the derivation." He then said, "The Arabs denied the name Ar-Rahman because of their ignorance about Allah and His attributes." Al-Qurtubi says, "It was said that both Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim have the same meaning. As such, the words Nadman and Nadim, as Abu Ubaid has said. Abu Ali al-Farsi said, Ar-Rahman, which is exclusively for Allah, is a name that encompasses every type of mercy that Allah has. Ar-Rahim is what affects the believers, for Allah said,
and He is ever Rahim, merciful to the believers.
Also, Ibn Abbas said about Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, they are two soft names. One of them is softer than the other, meaning it carries more implications of mercy. Ibn Jabir said, As-Suri bin Yahya at-Tirmimi narrated to me that Uthman bin Zufar related that al-Azrami said about Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim,
He is Ar-Rahman with all creation and Ar-Rahim with the believers.
Hence Allah's statements.
Then he rose over Istawa the throne in a manner that suits his majesty, Ar-Rahman, and Ar-Rahman, Allah, rose over Istawa the mighty throne in a manner that suits his majesty.
Allah thus mentioned the Istawa rising over the throne along with his name Ar-Rahman, to indicate that his mercy encompasses all of creation. Allah also said,
and He is ever Rahim, merciful to the believers.
Thus encompassing the believers with his name Ar-Rahim. They said, this testifies to the fact that Ar-Rahman carries a broader scope of meanings pertaining to the mercy of Allah and his creations in both lives. Meanwhile, Ar-Rahim is exclusively for the believers. Yet we should mention that there is a supplication that reads, the Rahman and the Rahim of this life and the thereafter. Allah's name, Ar-Rahman, is exclusively his. For instance, Allah said,
Say, O Muhammad, invoke Allah or invoke Ar-Rahman, Allah, by whatever name you invoke him. It is the same, for to him belongs the best names.
And
ask, O Muhammad, those of our messengers whom we sent before you, did we ever appoint al-Fatihah to be worshipped besides Ar-Rahman, most gracious Allah?
Furthermore, when Musaylima, the liar, called himself the Rahman of Yamama, Allah made him known by the name liar and exposed him. Hence, whenever Musaylima is mentioned, he is described as the liar. He becomes an example for lying among the residents of the cities and villages and the residents of the deserts, the Bedouins. Therefore, Allah first mentioned his name, Allah that is exclusively his, and describes this name by Ar-Rahman, which no one else is allowed to use, just as Allah said.
Say, O Muhammad, invoke Allah or invoke Ar-Rahman, by whatever name you invoke him. It is the same, for to him belong the best names.
Only Musaylima and those who followed his misguiding ways described Musaylima as Ar-Rahman. As for Allah's name, Ar-Rahim, Allah has described others by it. For instance, Allah said,
Verily there has come unto you a messenger, Muhammad, from amongst yourselves, I, whom you know well. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty. He, Muhammad, is anxious for you to be rightly guided for the believers, and he is kind, full of pity, and Rahim, merciful.
Allah has also described some of his creation using some of his other names. For instance, Allah said,
Verily, we have created man from nutfa, drops of mixed semen, sexual discharges of man and woman. In order to try him, so we made him a hearer, Sami, and seer, Basir.
In conclusion, there are several of Allah's names that are used as names for others besides Allah. Further, some of Allah's names are exclusive for Allah alone, such as Allah, Ar-Rahman, Al-Khaliq, the creator, Ar-Razik, the sustainer, and so forth. Hence Allah started the Tasmiyah, meaning the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, with his name Allah, and describes himself as Ar-Rahman, most gracious, which is softer and more general than Ar-Rahim. The most honorable names are mentioned first, just as Allah did here. A hadith narrated by Salama stated that the recitation of the Messenger of Allah was slow and clear, letter by letter.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Oh, the praises and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all exists. The most gracious, the most merciful, the owner of the day of recompense.
And this is how a group of scholars recite it. Others connected the recitation of the Tasmiyah to Al-Hamd. This has been Celeria Rosencreux. Farewell.